Hey guys, I wanted to read you The Sea, the Storm, and the Mangrove Tangle because I think it goes really well with our unit on habitats, and you guys are doing a bunch of research on habitats at home and reading all your articles about rainforests this week. So I thought I would share this story again with you. I know we read it once in class before, but I really like it, and I think it's a good example of why habitats are so important and how they're so connected to each other and how everything in the habitat makes an important piece of its puzzle. So, The Sea, the Storm, and the Mangrove Tangle by Lynn Cherry. A beautiful picture. Over a shallow, salty, tropical sea, a flock of pelicans flew around a mangrove island. From the branches of this tangle of mangroves dangled long, sprouting seeds called propagules. As a pelican landed, it jostled a branch, and a propagule fell into the sea. For weeks, the propagule was carried by a strong current until it came to rest on the shore of a faraway lagoon. There's the propagule there falling into the sea. There it took root, sprouted leaves, and began to grow. For decades, in the hot Caribbean sun, as tides rose and fell, it slowly grew and sent out prop roots to help it stand. By its 15th year, its vast network of roots anchored the little mangrove tree, allowing it to survive storms. It was now quite a distinctive little tree. And there's already people or animals that are making their homes there, isn't there? See some birds starting to land on it. A mangrove tree crab scuttled by and exclaimed, "How can a tree grow in this salty sea?" She climbed the seedling to eat its leaves and made the mangrove her home. Mangrove oysters, sea anemones, and a coral settled on the roots. Small fiddler crabs dashed and darted about below the high tide line and disappeared into holes under the mangrove's roots. See the crab here getting his leaf, and you can see the oysters down here and some coral there, and these are sea anemones. So things are starting to make their home on the mangrove tree. A periwinkle tree snail came upon the mangrove seedling, there he is, and thought, "I can eat the algae that grows on these roots." So it stayed on to live there. Mangrove leaves fell into the water, decomposed, and turned into muck. In this muck, seagrass began to grow, and you can see the seagrass starting to grow there. This mangrove tree is already starting to have some really important impacts on the world around it. Several more years passed, and the mangrove tree became larger, sending out more branches and prop roots. It grew flowers that were pollinated by the wind. See the flowers there? Pretty little yellow flowers. Let's flip this over here. Driftwood floating across the tree carried along lizards to the mangrove tree. We can eat the ants, mosquitoes, and other insects that crawl and fly over these flowers, they thought. Hummingbirds hid their nests within the mangrove's tangled branches, while a caterpillar and the mangrove tree crab nibbled on its leaves. There's the hummingbird and some butterflies. There's one of the lizards. Another butterfly, another lizard. Hummingbird, right up top there. Lots of animals starting to make their homes here. After the mangrove flowers dropped their petals, propagules formed. These living seeds grew long and heavy until they fell down between the mangrove roots into the seagrass. There, the new propagules began to grow. A seahorse carried his babies in a pouch in his belly. "Here is a good place for my babies to hide," he thought, and gently released them into the seagrass bed. Mama shrimp and fish laid their eggs there. Grunts and mangrove snappers fed in the seagrass at night, and during the day hid from bigger fish among the mangrove roots. So you can see the big fish here. If we come around, there's a couple of little seahorses holding onto the grass here, and some shrimp, some more seahorse. Look at all the little baby seahorses. Lots of little animals starting to make their homes here. And smaller fish. The propagules grew into many mangroves. For 70 years, this mangrove tangle grew and spread out farther and farther. Dolphins found the water around the mangroves teeming with fish and decided to stay there. Manatees came to feed in the seagrass, and they too made the waters around the mangroves their home. All kinds of mammals and reptiles moving in now. 100 years had passed since the first propagule planted itself here, and the mangrove tangle had become a big mangrove island. As a flock of pelicans dove for fish, 2 fishermen came by. One said, "Let's cut these mangroves down and create a shrimp farm." The other fisherman replied, "But these mangroves are the only trees that can grow in the salty seawater. Many of the fish in the ocean start their lives in nurseries around these mangrove islands. If we destroy the mangroves, we destroy the fish, which give us all food." And so they went out to sea and left the island in peace. That reminds me of a text-to-text connection with the story about the man who went into the rainforest to cut down the tree. What's that story called? The Great Kapok Tree. Remember that story? We read all about how the animals tried to talk the man into the reasons why he shouldn't cut down the rainforest tree, and he ended up not doing it. That kind of reminded me of that. Because the man talked the other man into not cutting down the mangroves. 2 pelicans tucked themselves into the mangroves and thought, "Here we can build a nest and dive for fish." Herons came to hunt for shrimp, crabs, and small fish. A magnificent frigate bird puffed up his large red pouch to impress his mate. So we have herons. And what other birds did we have? Pelicans over here. And here's the frigate bird up over here. You see him puffing up his chest to impress his mate here? One afternoon, a pelican flew to the mangrove island. Breathlessly, she cautioned, "Beware! Prepare! A storm brews! A wild wind blows this way!" She called to the creatures of the air, "Come hide deep within the tangled branches of the mangroves." The manatees lifted their noses on the air and sniffed. Yes, there was that sweet, deep scent of damp scent of rain. On the horizon, they saw far away plumes of rain descending from a raft of dark clouds. A hurricane was on its way. The seahorses called to the other creatures of the sea, "Come with us! Beneath the roots in the center of the mangroves, we will be safe!" So they swam, crawled, scurried, and slithered to the shelter of the mangrove roots. That evening, the breeze became a screaming tempest. Thick, dark, frothing clouds raced through the sky. "The hurricane is here!" the animals cried. Winds sang and moaned through the mangrove tangle, lashing, breaking, and tearing branches. The birds held on, fighting the power of the hurricane throughout the night. Under the sea, the sand churned as huge waves tossed and turned the fish and seahorses, trying to rip the mangrove roots from their hold on the seafloor. The next morning, all was still. The sun shone from behind retreating purple clouds, and a mangrove propagule floated away on the current. Here's that moment for predicting. What do you think is going to happen with this mangrove propagule that's now floating away on the current? Here's our mangrove tangle that saved all the animals. Here's the propagule. The birds came out from the safety of the mangrove's damaged branches. The periwinkle tree snails timidly peeked out from their shells and looked around. The fish, the crabs, and the seahorses swam out from the protection of the mangrove roots. All were safe. Meanwhile, the mangrove propagule, blown by the storm, came to rest on the shore of a faraway lagoon. See all the animals coming out safely? They survived the hurricane because of the mangrove tangle. Years have passed. Dead, bleached branches still tell the story of the hurricane. But new growth has sprouted from the mangrove's broken branches, and the mangrove island is even bigger, wider, and deeper. Now, while pelicans dry their feathers, and dolphins jump, roll, and play in the waves, and manatees lazily loll in their seagrass bed, while a heron hunts in the shallows and a hawk screeches. That mangrove propagule, carried on the waves to a faraway lagoon, has now grown into a little mangrove tree, and there it will continue to grow and grow and grow. One thing I noticed at the end of this book is that our author chose to say grow and grow and grow, just like she did back in the beginning with the first mangrove propagule as it began to grow and grow and grow. If we flip back to the beginning of the book, here's our little mangrove. It slowly grew and grew. And then this mangrove is also going to grow and grow and grow. Why do you think our author chose to repeat these words and to repeat what she had said about the first mangrove tangle about the second one? I'd like you guys to tell me a little bit about what the important part of the mangrove habitat was in the story. So if you want to respond on Seesaw and tell me, why was the mangrove tangle such an important habitat? And what types of animals did you see in that habitat? I'll talk to you tomorrow, and you guys have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.